Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive with us. Today, we're going all the way to Australia.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, down under. To explore the sometimes dangerous world of investigative journalism.
Oh, I like this one already.
I know, right? And to guide us on this journey, we have an incredible interview with Kate McClymont.
Okay, yeah, I know this name.
Yeah, she's like a legend, almost 40 years, with the Sydney Morning Herald, uncovering all sorts of stuff.
So what kind of stories are we talking about here?
Well, everything from political corruption to, organized crime, all that shady stuff.
No kidding. And she's been doing this for 4 decades. She must have some stories.
Oh, you have no idea.
Yeah.
She's even faced, death threats and lawsuits for her work.
Seriously? Wow, that's intense.
Yeah, it is, but it doesn't seem to slow her down at all.
I guess when you're passionate about the truth, nothing can really stop you, right?
Exactly, and that really comes through in this interview. She talks about what it's like working on cases where the main suspect just vanishes.
Oh, like disappears completely.
Pretty much, yeah. And she also talks about how Australia's defamation laws, can really impact investigative reporting.
Oh, yeah, I've heard about those. They're pretty strict down there.
They are, which makes her work even more impressive. Yeah. But we'll get into all that later.
Sounds good.
First, I want to talk about this Melissa Caddick case. Have you heard of this one?
Vaguely, I think it rings a bell.
Yeah. Well, Caddick was running this massive Ponzi scheme.
Yeah.
She defrauded investors of like $23 million.
Wait, $23 million? That's crazy.
Yeah, over US $15 million. And she spent it all on, like a lavish lifestyle.
What kind of lavish are we talking?
We'll get this, a diamond necklace worth $150,000.
For one necklace. Jeez.
I know, right? It's wild. And then after the police raided her home, she just disappeared.
What? No way.
Yeah, and months later, they found her foot washed up on a beach.
Hold on. Just her foot.
Yeah, it's still a mystery. Still unsolved to this day.
It sounds like something straight out of a movie.
It does, right?
Yeah.
And what's even crazier is that McClymont stumbled upon this whole thing while working on a different case.
Really? So it was just by chance?
Yeah, she was actually investigating something else entirely, and then boom, this whole Caddick thing explodes.
Wow, talk about being in the right place at the right time.
Totally, and it just shows how, investigative journalism is all about connecting those dots.
Like following a trail that leads you to something unexpected?
Exactly. And in this case, it led McClymont to create this hit podcast called Liar, Liar.
Oh, yeah, I think I've heard of that one. It's about Caddick, right?
Yep. It delves into the whole Ponzi scheme, her disappearance, the whole 9 yards.
So she's like a podcasting star now, too.
Pretty much. And the podcast actually earned her another Walkley Award.
Remind me, what's a Walkley again?
Oh, it's like Australia's top journalism prize. Kind of like their Pulitzer.
Oh, wow. Impressive. So how many does she have now?
This one brought her total to 9.
Yeah.
9 Walkley Awards.
That's incredible. I mean, especially considering how tough it is to do investigative journalism in Australia.
Oh, yeah. You're right about that, especially with those defamation laws.
Right. Sydney's like the defamation capital of the world or something.
Yeah, it's pretty notorious. And for good reason, those laws make it super risky for journalists to do any kind of in-depth investigations.
Yeah, I imagine it's like walking on eggshells all the time.
Pretty much. And it can have serious consequences.
I bet. Do you have an example?
Well, there was this case where a prominent businessman sued a small news outlet for defamation.
Okay, and what happened?
The lawsuit went on for years and ended up bankrupting the entire outlet.
Seriously? Even if the reporting was accurate?
Yeah, it can be that harsh.
Yeah.
Which is why a lot of people call it a chilling effect on investigative reporting.
It makes sense. Nobody wants to risk financial ruin just for doing their job.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It can be really tough. And it makes you wonder how anyone in Australia can do this kind of work with all those risks hanging over their heads.
Right. It takes a certain kind of person, I guess, someone who's really committed to the truth.
Absolutely. And that brings us to another fascinating case from McClymont's career, her investigation into this corrupt politician, Eddie Obeid.
Okay. Eddie Obeid, what's the story there?
Well, this investigation went on for years, starting all the way back in 1999.
Wow, 1999.
Yeah, and it really shows you the kind of grit and determination it takes to be an investigative journalist, especially in a place like Australia.
Okay, I'm intrigued. So what exactly was going on with this Obeid character?
So what exactly was going on with this Obeid character?
Well, Obeid was like a big shot in the New South Wales Labour Party, a real power player.
Okay.
Well, McClymont, she suspected that he was using his political influence, for his own personal gain.
So she thought he was corrupt.
Exactly. And she was determined to prove it, so she started digging and digging.
And what did she find?
A whole lot of dirt.
Yeah.
Let me tell you, she uncovered this whole web of corrupt dealings.
Like what? Give me an example.
Well, for one, she found out that Obaid was using his position to help out his family's businesses.
Ah, so classic corruption, using your power to line your own pockets.
Exactly. It was a huge scandal. It really shook things up in New South Wales.
Yeah, I bet. But I'm guessing this Obaid guy wasn't just going to sit back and let her expose him, right?
Oh, no. He fought back hard. He was a tough opponent.
How so?
Well, for starters, he hired private investigators to follow McClymont around.
Seriously? Like they were tailing her?
Yeah, can you imagine that? Having someone watching your every move?
That's creepy. And intimidating.
Totally. And on top of that, she got hit with a defamation lawsuit.
Ah, so they tried to silence her through legal means?
Exactly. It was
Yeah.
a classic tactic, trying to bury her in legal fees and make her back down.
So what happened with the lawsuit?
Well, it dragged on for years. It cost McClymont and the Sydney Morning Herald a fortune.
Wow. It must have been tough.
It was. But McClymont, she's not easily intimidated. She kept pushing forward.
That's impressive.
Yeah, it really is. She kept digging. She kept publishing her findings. And guess what?
What?
Eventually, all her hard work paid off. Obaid was convicted on corruption charges.
No way. So she actually brought him down.
She did. He was sentenced to prison not once, but twice.
Wow, that's incredible. That's a real testament to the power of investigative journalism.
It really shows how holding those in power accountable can make a real difference.
Exactly. And it's inspiring to see someone like McClymont who wouldn't give up even when things got tough.
Totally. So speaking of the challenges of investigative journalism, McClymont talked about using this really expensive database for her research. What's that all about?
Oh, yeah, that's interesting. So basically, this database is like a gold mine of information on companies and properties.
Okay. Sounds useful.
It allows journalists to track down ownership records, financial transactions, all sorts of stuff that would be really hard to find otherwise.
So it's like a secret weapon for investigative reporters.
Kinda.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a super powerful tool, but it comes with a hefty price tag.
How hefty are we talking?
Well, access to this database can cost tens of thousands of dollars per year.
Whoa, that's a lot.
It is, which means that a lot of smaller news organizations just can't afford it.
So it creates this kind of inequality in terms of who can do this kind of in-depth reporting.
Exactly. And McClymont actually talks about that in the interview.
Yeah.
She's a big advocate for collaboration in investigative journalism.
Makes sense, especially when resources are limited.
Yeah, she really encourages younger journalists to, team up with more experienced reporters.
To learn from the best.
Exactly. It's all about sharing knowledge and resources to make sure the truth gets out there.
It's like a team effort.
Totally. Now, speaking of learning from experience, McClymont was also really candid about her own mistakes.
Oh, everyone makes mistakes, right?
Exactly. And she talked about this one time where she mixed up two people with the same name.
Oh, no.
Yeah, and it was a big deal because it ended up in her book.
What
They
happened?
had to pulp the entire edition of the book.
Ouch. That must have been embarrassing.
I'm sure it was, but she owned up to it and, learned from it.
Well, that's important to be able to admit when you're wrong.
Absolutely. And she also talked about this other time where she accidentally used the wrong units of measurement in a story about a murder trial.
The wrong units of measurement. How does that even happen?
Well, apparently based on her calculations, the victim would have ended up on the moon.
Wait, what? That's hilarious.
Yeah, it sounds funny now, but at the time it was a pretty serious mistake.
I bet. It just goes to show how important accuracy is in journalism.
Totally. Even a small error can really damage your credibility.
For sure. So I'm curious, how does someone like McClymont, who's been doing this intense work for decades, avoid burnout?
Right. It seems like it would be incredibly draining.
Well, she admits that it's a constant struggle, but she says that she finds energy in those aha moments, those breakthroughs in an investigation where everything suddenly clicks into place.
I can see how that would be invigorating.
Yeah, those moments of discovery, they kind of fuel her passion and remind her why she does what she does.
So it's like a reward for all the hard work and frustration.
Exactly. And speaking of challenges, McClymont made this really interesting point about envying U.S. journalists.
Oh, why is that?
Well, she's envious of their access to court documents and evidence. Oh, that makes sense. The U.S. system is much more transparent in that regard.
It is, and it makes you think about how that level of transparency can really help investigative journalism.
It does, right?
Yeah.
It's like having more tools in your toolbox.
Exactly. And it raises questions about the balance between protecting privacy and, making sure the public has access to information.
Right. It's a complex issue for sure.
It is, and it's something we should all be thinking about as informed citizens.
Well, this deep dive has been fascinating so far. Are we ready to wrap things up?
Yeah, let's bring this conversation home and leave our listeners with some final thoughts on Kate McClymont's incredible career.
Okay, so we've talked about, the high stakes cases, the legal battles, all that.
Yeah.
But what really stands out to me is just McClymont's resilience. I mean, after decades of this kind of work.
It's amazing, right? All those death threats, lawsuits, powerful people trying to silence her. And she just keeps going.
It's really inspiring, and she actually said something about those threats that really stuck with me.
What was that?
Well, she said that the threats that worry her the most aren't the obvious ones.
Okay, the angry phone calls or,
It's-
letters.
Those she can kind of handle. It's the threats that come out of nowhere, the ones you don't see coming that really get to her.
Wow, that's scary.
Yeah, it is. It makes you realize just how dangerous this kind of work can be, especially when you're dealing with organized crime or corrupt officials.
It's like a constant shadow hanging over you.
Right. And it makes you wonder, how do you even protect yourself from that?
It's a tough question. There's no easy answer.
No, definitely not.
McClymont talks about taking precautions, being aware of her surroundings, trusting her instincts.
But even then, there's always a risk.
There is, and I think that takes a toll on you.
She's actually pretty open about that in the interview, the emotional and mental strain of this work.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. It's a high-pressure job.
It is, and she talks about dealing with burnout, juggling multiple investigations, deadlines, all that.
It's got to be exhausting. I'm sure it is.
Yeah.
She even talks about needing to step away sometimes, get a good night's sleep, spend time with her family just to recharge.
That's important.
It is. But even then, she says that her mind is often still working on a case, trying to connect the dots.
Sounds like it's hard to switch off completely.
Yeah, it does, right? It seems like a real all-consuming passion.
Definitely. And I'm curious what keeps her going after all these years. What's the fuel?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
Well, she talks about those aha moments, those breakthroughs in an investigation where everything suddenly makes sense.
Those must feel amazing.
I bet they do. Like a reward for all the hard work.
And a validation that you're on the right track.
Exactly. So I guess it's the thrill of the chase, the satisfaction of uncovering the truth that keeps her going.
Yeah, I think that's part of it. But it's also about the impact of her work. She's seen firsthand how investigative journalism can actually make a difference.
Pull people accountable, expose wrongdoing.
Exactly. It's about more than just, uncovering scandals or getting a scoop.
It's about making a real impact on society.
Exactly. And that's why this whole deep dive is so important.
It reminds us of the crucial role that investigative journalism plays.
In a functioning democracy, for sure.
Without it, who would hold those in power accountable?
It's like the fourth estate keeping everyone in check.
Exactly. And we need to support the people who are brave enough to do this work, people like Kate McClymont.
Absolutely. By reading their stories, sharing them, talking about them.
And speaking out against any attempts to silence them.
It's on all of us to protect the free press.
Because a free press means a more informed public.
And a more just society.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I hope everyone listening has a newfound appreciation for the dedication and courage it takes to be an investigative journalist.
Especially in a place like Australia with those strict laws.
Yeah, it's not an easy job,
Mm-hmm.
but it's a vital one.
Absolutely. And Kate McClymont is a shining example of what it means to be truly committed to the truth.
She's a real inspiration.
She is. Her unwavering pursuit of the truth, her resilience, her commitment to justice, it's all incredibly admirable.
Well said. So thank you, everyone, for joining us on this deep dive into the world of Kate McClymont.
It's been a pleasure.
We'll catch you next time for another fascinating exploration.